Welcome, humans, to this episode of Conversations on Crisis. This is about crisis, whether you're facing it, you're in the midst of it, or you just got through it. We as humans are unique, but the crises that we face, they're not. And it's good to know that you're not alone when you're going through that. This conversation is meant to uplift, educate, encourage, and inspire, all that is in line with my personal mission statement, which is to encourage others through their challenges while inspiring them to live up to their fullest potential on the way to healing and wellness. You can find more information about myself, Coach Nate, what I do, these episodes at my website, natebattle.com. There you can also see a copy of my book and download it or purchase it, Battle Endurance. And if you love the content that I do, I encourage you to go on over to my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Nate Battle. As I mentioned, I'm Coach Nate here with my co-host, Ian Cavan, and we also have a distinguished guest who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. Brother Ian, what's the good word for this morning?
The good word is prosperity. That one just came to me, so let's stick with that. Prosperity in thought, prosperity in health and wealth, and always looking for that silver lining, right? That glimmer of hope, which is why we are together on this beautiful day. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Nate, you're looking good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I shaved.
Yeah, you look good.
Yeah, it's amazing how people clean up at times.
I know, right? So who do we have on today? Let's get started with our guest.
We have a very special guest. We are honored to have Mr. Eric Kelly. He is the president of the Quantum Foundation, a West Palm Beach-based health corporation. And he is responsible for directing a multi-million-dollar community investment fund, overseeing all of the administrative duties of that organization. He's a community leader who works across businesses, nonprofit, public sectors to ensure community improvement initiatives are sustainable and offer systemic solutions. He's often challenges the historical philanthropic assumption of doing charity in an effort to create effective drivers for change. And he's led efforts in partnership with the state, regional, and local stakeholders to improve the health and well-being of the people of Palm Beach County. So Eric is about helping people. And in this unprecedented crisis that we're in right now, we need hope. And what are we going to do about it? And most importantly, what's going to happen on the other side? So that's why we've got Eric here today to talk a little about that. Eric, how are you today?
I'm well and glad to be here with you, gentlemen. It's good to be here. Love the topic, the conversation. We all know what crisis feels like. We all have hope for the other side of it, and it's good to be a part of the conversation with you, gentlemen.
Well, we're glad to have you here.
Mm-hmm.
In reading your bio and reading more about you, I suspect it is a understatement of who you are and the work that you have done and what you're all about, which kind of drives me to ask a question. You always want to know who a person is. There was a lot of empathy and a lot of concern and compassion in those words. If you read through those words, it says this is a person that cares about other people. So when you find individuals like that, it makes you want to ask, how did something happen in your life to make you be that type of a person, the person you are? So we'll start with, how did your early childhood days shape who you are in your career?
Yeah, I had an amazing childhood. Now, as a kid growing up in the old country on dirt roads in a shotgun house with my grandparents, with my mom, a single parent. We lived with our grandparents for a while, my older sister and me, and then my mom. Remember the old show, The Jeffersons? They sang the song, Moving On Up. Mm-hmm. So we moved on up from the shotgun house of poverty in the country to the projects. So that's how we moved up to the east side, to the housing projects. But I still say what an amazing childhood I had for a couple of reasons. Number one, we were economically poor, but my mom never let on to it.
Hmm.
I never knew I was poor. Now in hindsight, we were probably about dirt poor. However, one of the things I saw from my family, my entire family, growing up in economic poverty and without the access that others had, I saw a sense of caring and sharing like none other. My mom, this is something I'll never forget. For a while, my mom didn't even have a car. She worked as a presser in the dry cleaners, made about $8,000 or $9,000 a year. My wife and I, we have 4 children. Our children will eat $8,000 in food a month. So how my mom, how she lived on $8,000 or $9,000 a year, and she worked 12, 14 hours a day in the dry cleaners. It was just wage inequity. She didn't make a lot of money. But there were times, my mom would have a car. She would walk to the grocery store. She would walk places that she needed. But it was nothing for my mom to pick up a couple of extra items for people who didn't have. It was nothing for us to walk to the store, then to walk somewhere else so that my mom could go and give somebody else something that they needed. So from a very young age, Nate, I learned quickly that no matter your condition and station in life, there is still a responsibility to care for others. And that just drove real deep into my heart. And my mom to this day is like my best friend. I call a girl when I talk to her. So you got to be close to your mom when you call a girl. Hey girl, what you doing? But she just showed that to not only to me but now to my both my sisters, my older sister, and then we have a younger sister. So mom, she showed us that. She taught us that.
So here's a man that was sandwiched in between 2 sisters with a tremendous mom. And you don't hear often nowadays that I had a great childhood. More often than not, you hear of the trauma, of the challenges. So,
well, let me say this: it was traumatic. Now, how do you juxtapose that? It was. I've never met my biological father. So we lived again from the old shotgun house of the country to the housing projects. I never met my father. We were often economically challenged. I just didn't know how challenging it was. And there have been some long playing records in my head about how that impacted me. We more here at Quantum, we more recently funded some work around childhood ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And I am clear that the kind of environment, my mom was very loving, our household was loving, but the external environment certainly can be challenging and traumatic. The reason, Nate, I say I had a great childhood is because love conquers all. And one of the things that my mom did was she loved, and still does, she loves very well. Now, having said that, I wanted to start with the great childhood. Having said that, the conditions around our communities, it was traumatic. And not because the people living in our communities, but because of the lack of investment and the disinvestment around our communities. So that part was very traumatic. It was very traumatic growing up, in a sense, in a place where you didn't know if you mattered based on the kind of resourcing that came into those communities. You didn't know if anybody cared about you or the people living in the communities where you live. So that part of it is traumatic. That part of it is very challenging. I say I personally had a great childhood because, look, I remember, my mom, after she'd get off on Fridays from the cleaners, she'd always come home, and I loved spaghetti. And she'd make a big old pot of spaghetti, and she'd stop by the store and buy some donuts. And man, you couldn't tell me life wasn't good. I didn't know what else was happening around me. So that's the juxtaposition between the trauma and me saying, but it was a great life. So if I could have had resources, I'm sure I would have chosen it. But since I didn't have it, I'll have to call what I had in that moment great.
Made the best out of what you had.
Out of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So now it makes more sense that you're having spent your entire career in philanthropy and the nonprofit sector. When did you know that you were called to helping people who were hurting?
When I graduated college, Florida State University, my first goal in life was become a physician. I wanted to be a physician. And so I left high school with the plan of becoming a physician, went to Florida State. And while I was at Florida State, I was studying the pre-med track. But then what I realized later on, and wasn't that I realized it, I met organic chemistry. And anybody who's gone through a medical track know that organic chemistry is the course that will determine your future for you if you haven't already determined it. And so I didn't make it past organic chemistry. And so I decided that I wasn't going to be a physician, or organic chemistry decided it for me. But then I decided, all right, so I'm going to go to law school. I got accepted into law school down here at the University of Miami. Had a pretty bad car accident, and just before school was to start. And so I ended up not going to law school for a year, and I deferred the seat for a year because I just had this pretty traumatic car accident. But within that year, a lot happened. A lot can happen in 12 months. Within that year, two things happened. One was I acknowledged a call to ministry, and I was 23, I think 24 at the time. And the other thing that happened is I got a job working for a nonprofit. It's an organization called the Marine Institute, Associated Marine Institutes, AMI. And they worked with kids who were in the juvenile justice system. And it was levels, 1 through 7. 7 was basically little junior prisons. 1 is you're working with them in the community. I worked in a level 2 where they would either come from a higher level or they would get adjudicated to come to our school. It was actually an alternative school. And I tell you what, guys, it was then. It was then. I must have been, by this time, in my mid-20s, and I was working with these kids who had backgrounds who were somewhat similar to mine. They either grew up in housing projects or some economic poverty. Many of them did not have their dads around, and I always have to qualify that statement. And that's not always a function of those men who didn't want to be there. It is to some degree a function of the society who created other ways that they couldn't or shouldn't be there. And so it's a little bit of both and. I don't want to say that us not having fathers in our communities was all because we didn't have the men who wanted to stay. So, but most of the kids that I saw in this program were like me in that regard. And it was in that moment while I was working with those kids, and primarily kids of color, that I realized this is my calling. I've got to be here to help, particularly these young kids who were a lot like me, and I had seen a path forward, and I wanted to be there to help guide them. So mid-20s, I was working with some kids in the juvenile justice system, and I realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to help people.
It sounds like you've just repeatedly, some people don't like the saying, but taken lemons and made lemonade.
Yeah.
From your early childhood upbringing to what happened early on in college. What causes you emotional and emotional and mental pain in today's society?
All right, so I'm going to tie all of this back to what I just said. The way I grew up, I wasn't clear about what was happening around me. I just thought it was supposed to be that way. When I grew up in housing projects, the cinder block walls, I used to sit in my bedroom and follow the tracing of the lines. The blocks, they were always laid in that staggered position, and I would sit and follow the lines. And I thought, maybe this is normal. Maybe it's normal that all of the kids who look like me out here, the dads weren't here. Maybe it's normal that we don't have the same things that the kids we see in school who don't look like us. Maybe it was normal. And then when I started working with the kids in the justice system, I started wondering, hold on, all of these kids look like me. And then I began to study more around I started looking at the social science around poverty. Then I started looking at the social science around policy and how policy and poverty had this interesting relationship. And now, as a more mature adult working in this field of philanthropy and nonprofit, and having worked in government, I had a little stint in government up in Tallahassee. I worked for state government in Tallahassee for a minute, about 3 years. It wasn't long, but then I started to realize, hold on, this isn't all coincidental, and it's not supposed to be this way. And that's when the pain started. And gentlemen, it's hard for me to describe this pain because it's not the pain of you burn your finger. It's not the pain of you stomp your toe. It's not the pain when you fall off of a bicycle. Because all of those things you can get ice or, and I don't know why we did this in the country. You get burned, they put butter on it. Please don't do that to your children. And if y'all still doing that in the country anywhere, stop doing that. But they'll get butter. I don't know who told them that. But that pain can sometimes just stop. The pain that I started sensing before I knew I was feeling it was when I realized my life, although my mom made the best of it, it was good as I knew it. And the lives of these kids that I was working with in the justice system, all of a sudden I started realizing, this wasn't accidental. This isn't supposed to be this way. Or, this doesn't have to be this way. I think when I started seeing some of the intentionality behind inequity, and when I began to see the pain, I had a decent life, a great life because of my mom's love. But when I started really seeing the pain that poverty can bring, and when I knew that it in some ways was a construct, and in other ways, I sensed that it didn't have to be that way. And I started saying, why do people have to hurt when there are other ways for them to live? And that's when it started hurting. And so today, I mean, obviously I am pained by the civil and social unrest. I mean, I'm pained by both the fact that it's happening, but I'm more pained by why it's happening. I mean, you follow history, and any people who are oppressed for any amount of time, they're going to revolt. And so the pain that I feel was, I feel the pain of why are people responding the way they're responding, but I also feel the pain of the response. And so now for me, it's not a pain that keeps me up at night. People used to ask me as a CEO, what keeps you up at night? I say nothing, because I love my sleep. I have 4 children, and for 10 years, I never slept. Now that they're older, I sleep all the time. I don't get up for anything. But the thing that does cause me pain is when I see people who hurt and it doesn't have to be that way. And I see a lot of that around us today. It doesn't have to be this way, gentlemen. And there's more that we can do, and there's more that we're going to do to alleviate some of the social inequity that causes pain, and some of the lack that's causing pain. That's what I hate to see people hurting, man. I hate to see other people hurt. That's what pains me the most.
It sounds like you exemplify one of the quotes in my book is, when the pain of the present becomes greater than the fear of the future, that's when real change begins to take place. And when I wrote that, it was in the perspective of an individual and them changing. But you have taken that to a different level of it's caused you to reach out. You felt the pain, but it wasn't necessarily your pain. It was the pain of others. And that caused you to desire to want to be a change agent. So the part of that talks about fear of the future, when you went to embark on that. So nothing keeps you awake at night. I get that, especially during that diaper changing 2-year-old, those stages.
They're nearly grown now.
But there was that loss of sleep. So yeah, sleep is important. But did you have any fears about approaching what it is that what you went on to accomplish and do to alleviate that pain of others?
Yeah. There's a quote that I saw. It said something like, speak the truth even when your voice is shaking. And you know, I like to think that I'm a man of great courage and bravery, and I don't fear anything. You know, fear, we shouldn't fear. But here's the truth. The truth is, yes, there were things that I actually feared. I feared what will happen if, you know, this little poor kid from Palatka, Florida, ever really acted on the desires of his heart to see change happen, or acted on the desires of his heart to help those who are the most marginalized and oppressed. What happens to that person? You know, history would tell us that individuals who sought to change systems, or individuals who stepped between oppression and the people, didn't work out so good for them in the end, you know. So there was a thought, what happens to someone whose heart has been arrested by the inequities of its day? what happens to that person? So there was a little, there was some fear of that. And then the other thing that I guess if I talk about fear is, what if it can't change? What if everything that I do does nothing? And what if it all just remains the same? And in both instances, I could not wrestle my way out of the arrest. My heart had been arrested. I was under arrest for the cause of change. And so even with that sense of, all right, I have some sense of trepidation about what happens to people who stand between the oppression and the people, and what happens to the individual when he or she gives all they've got and you don't see things change the way you want to see it change. None of that said, stop though. Now I'm also, I'm a man of faith. And so the other thing I have to do is I have to be faith-filled to believe that change can happen. And those things that can cause fear, we have to let them be. And I like to think that there's simply shadows, because one thing about a shadow is it's only the absence of light. When you apply light to a shadow, anybody can do it. You have a shadow, apply light to it, the shadow disappears. What I like to think is the things that I fear were just shadows. And then when truth and light appear, it erases the shadow, then I can move on.
Nice. Profound. It sounds like you faced fear.
Yeah.
And you went down the path of what if it didn't, what if it never, and that then got into hopelessness. But you then came back around and said, but my hope is in my faith, and work through that. What are you most hopeful about today?
And I'm so glad you asked that. I smile when I hear that. I mean, you can see the pictures behind me, right? This is my baby girl. This is Maddie. Maddie Cake, I call her. And that's Maddie and my wife, Kira. And over here, these are the boys when they were younger. That's Mason and Miles at the top there, and that's Malachi and Maddie behind it. You can't really see this one, but this is them as teenagers.
Beautiful family. Oh,
they're amazing. The thing I'm most hopeful about is the future that they're going to get to have, and the future that their contemporaries will have. Look, we're in distress now, as a nation. I mean, look, let's just be honest. We're in social unrest, and we talk about all the unrest right now. I am hopeful that not only this generation, but the generations to come will come on the other side of what we're wrestling right now. And it just doesn't feel good. And particularly in my age group, the 50-something-year-old, we're not so young that we're as hopeful as these younger folks, but I'm not necessarily old enough to really know and feel all of the oppression. I sit right here in this middle place where I think we've been called to do the work for those who have gone on and to also bring along those who are coming. So I am actually hopeful, though, that this next generation will have not better. I'm not saying it's going to be easier, but there'll be greater opportunity for equity. And I'll define equity as a fair and just opportunity. And the word of the day, Ian said, prosperity. And not just wealth and money, but Ian, I think you said prosperity of thought, prosperity of health, as well as wealth. I'm hopeful for the next generation to embrace prosperity, not just in finances and economics, but prosperity in thinking, in being, as well as in living. So that's what I'm actually hopeful about. I'll fight until my last breath, as long as I can believe that behind the fight, when the dust settles, there's going to be a group of people who will emerge more united, better positioned, and more prosperous. Again, not just in financial prosperity, but in, as Ian said, prosperity in the way we think, prosperity in the way we feel. And that, man, I tell you, that is what gives me the greatest hope. I can smile all day when I think about that. Matter of fact, old folk used to say it this way, where I grew up in the church: I believe I'll run on to see what the end is going to be. and I get the sense that I believe I'll run on now and see what the end is going to be. And it may not be the end for me, that I get to see it all, but for my children, and I may not even get to see it for them, but I believe that there'll be a change. So I'm hopeful for change, man. I'm gonna stand on that.
Ian, does that tie into what you were meaning about
Yeah, I mean,
prosperity?
absolutely, absolutely. From hearing Eric's background, which is, so amazing, and there's so many similar stories like Eric's background of single parenthood and living in a way that was, your mother gave you all the love in the world, and that's where your childhood prospered. You had a lot of prosperity and love from your mom, and you were able to hold on to that. And as we look to the future, and we see these crumbling systems, everything from Hollywood to what true wealth really is, whether it's financial wealth or it's health, right? Health is your first wealth. We're starting to get to a place on the planet of a consciousness level that will allow for more prosperity, especially having platforms like this where we talk about the way that we're feeling, which is hard to argue. But opening up these doors and reaching in for things that we already have, things that our parents gave us, we recognize just how well we are actually doing, and that we having a prosperous future is in fact, just beyond the next day, is waiting for us, because it's already inside of us. And that's one of the things that your mother was able to help you with when you were young, and my parents as well. I grew up with my mom and dad, and they both they loved me and my sister very, very much, and we never felt that we didn't have love, and we didn't really feel that we didn't have anything. I remember when the other kids in my neighborhood got new bikes. I wish I could get a bike like theirs. And when my dad did buy the bike, but he didn't want to spend $100, he only spent $70 on it. I was happy that, that my bike was a little different from everybody else's. And then I freaked it the way that it came out, and I learned, through that process of being grateful for what I have. So, it completely aligns with the thought of the day: prosperity, recognizing what we have and what's out there for us.
And I may be forgetting some of this. I love language, and I remember this has been some years ago, so I may be messing this up. I think it may be in Hebrew, the word for prosperity. I may be messing this up, so I hope nobody's researching this after I'm done saying. But I believe the word is in one of those ancient languages. Actually means like a breakthrough. It means a breakthrough. So prosperity is not necessarily the end of a thing. Prosperity is the journey to the thing, but when you really get through the threshold. And I'm slowly remembering this word picture of prosperity as it is when you are moving through from one level or place to the next, whether it's in thinking, whether it's in health and well-being, whether it's financially. But it's that breakthrough, that point where you actually break through. And no, man, and what when you gave that word, I actually wrote it down, Ian: prosperity, thought, health, and wealth. I wrote it down. I'm going to take that today. And again, this is not about money necessarily. It really is about how you think, because how you think is what's going to lead you to wherever else you're going to go anyway. So I like that. I like that.
I'd like to add a little bit to that thought about consciousness, right? There are so many different people in our society, and each person plays a different role. You're going to have a barber, you're going to have your carpenter, you're going to have your electrician, and you're going to have your teacher, you're going to have your spiritualist. And I am sensing from your walk, Eric, and the story that you shared, that when your consciousness started to peak and you recognized that outside of your thought, that you were moved, and you have stayed the course. So that's way more than thinking. Nate and I, we love talking about Eckhart Tolle, and I was just listening to one of his books before our call to kind of get myself together for the call. And sure enough, it's when we dwell too much in our thoughts, then we can talk ourselves in or out of anything. But there's a consciousness, there's that feeling of knowing that other people shouldn't suffer. There's a feeling of knowing that though you may not be doing as good as some, you're doing far better than most. Hence the great lesson your mom taught you about, going to the store and buying something for people along the way, you recognize that, hey, we're doing bad, but there are people out there that are doing a whole lot worse. And so that consciousness was something that you were given, and it was sparked, and it's a weapon for you to brandish and a tool for you to use, and to give voice to those who don't have a voice. So let's add consciousness to our word stream of the day.
I got it, man. I love that. I love that.
So this is drilling way down into this word. It's just, unfortunately, people have defined prosperity as, in economic terms, purely. The dictionary is a state of doing well, long period. So there's mental health, there's economic health, there's equality. There's so many things that are packed into that. So for the definition of the word of the day that Brother Ian has given us, prosperity, it is all encompassing. It is, from an individual perspective, taking all of that person into account. Ian, you said it, health is the new wealth. There are wealthy people that cannot eradicate themselves of certain diseases and conditions. We've learned that with with the pandemic that we're currently facing. It also, if we're talking about definition, it sounds like, Eric, you have found the true definition of success in the world. According to Nate, I define success as when I lay my head on the pillow at night, I have peace within my soul. Mm. And if you're able to sleep as soundly as you do, you have that, and you have that. And the inspiring part of this is you have it because you mentioned it. You're doing the work of those that have gone on for those that are coming behind you. If we could change our perspectives from instant or self-gratification, why am I doing this for me, for my gain, to one of, I'm carrying on the work of those that have made sacrifices, that have gone on, those that tried to plant seeds and pave a way and make it a little less difficult, not easy, but a little less difficult for me. And so in paying homage to them, I'm going to continue with that work. And the beneficiary of my efforts are going to be people who are coming behind me. Some aren't born. If we do what it is that we do for our children and our children's children, if we're willing to set apart our own selfishness and become selfless and enact and work and labor, living sacrifices to do things. I ain't trying to preach here, but it's just what you said is stirring it up. To do what it is that we do, and you're doing it. You're a living example of that for generations to come. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is a legacy. That is a life well lived. And that, to me, is a solution to many of the world's ills, what we're facing, what we're dealing with. A lot of the angst, a lot of what's going on in our nation right now is due to selfishness, is due to fear, lack of understanding. It can really boil down, if we cared about other people, truly, that we wouldn't face that. So yeah, you hit on a point. I needed to speak a little bit about that because it's near and dear to my heart, and that's a way to healing. It's a pathway to healing as an individual, as a society, as a world. And this dirt ball that we're on, spinning around in the middle of nowhere. We can have faith that this thing is going to continue to hover in space, even though there's gravity on Earth, right? But not enough to say, okay, that's another conversation for another day. Wow, that was great. I love where you both went with that.
A great segue too, Nate, on back to what we're here to accomplish, if you will, through this conversation is healing and results. And as you outlined, through Eric's demonstration, he dedicated his life to the work. He recognized the way that he was feeling, his consciousness, his calling, and his healing for himself has come through him healing the community as well, by providing resources to them, by putting himself in a position For example, in this particular case with the Quantum Foundation, putting yourself in a position that will help you to come up with solutions.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think that's a great segue into solutions.
Mhm.
Absolutely. What area do you see are the opportunities for our communities as we plan to recover from this pandemic, COVID-19?
You know, one of the things I have, speaking of being hopeful, one of the things I have been extremely um, not only hopeful about, but having a chance to actually to really experience is the level of unity that it is existing among people, different backgrounds, different races, ethnicities, different backgrounds in terms of social and economic, that are all saying one thing. There's been inequitable treatment in places that COVID-19 has only exacerbated or highlighted. But what I believe the opportunity we have today is to capitalize on the unifying of voices that are ready to move, either it's a neighborhood, a whole community, a society, city, a county, a state, our nation, in one direction, where again, I go back to what I say is the definition of equity, where all have the same just and fair opportunity to be prosperous or have their optimal opportunity for life outcomes. And I really believe there's something now in the wind, in the air, in the water, whatever, choose your idiom, where people want to come together and talk about a way forward. I'll give you an example. I've had the opportunity now since COVID-19, since March, to work on two major projects here in Palm Beach County. One was initially around testing, because one of the first things that we recognized here at Quantum was, I mean, we're a health foundation, and we know how important access is to medical services. And we also know the barriers and the challenges that communities can face when they can't get, either by transportation or some other means or mode or financial, they don't get the service they need. So we recognized early that there were going to be some of the same disinvested communities that were not going to have the same opportunities for testing. And so tell you, man, it was just a matter of a couple phone calls that Found Care Health Center was the first phone call I made, and Yolette Bonet, she's the president and CEO there. And she jumped right on. She's like, Eric, you know, I'll get my team together. They were doing testing in their parking lot at the health center, but they had not gone out into communities. And we have a system here, a mapping system called PolicyLink at the foundation. And so what we did, we ran some analytics on where would this disease, where would the virus wreak the greatest havoc? And we looked at factors like high incidence of diabetes or hypertension, pulmonary or cardio factors. And we also looked at places where there were comorbidities, where people were carrying around more than one of these disease processes. We also looked at the communities where there was a higher concentration of 65-year-olds and older, and where there may be multiple generations living in one household. And we laid that alongside all of these other socioeconomic factors of poverty. And there were specifically 7 census tracts that came up in Palm Beach County. And the ones that we often know about: Belgrade, Pahokee, South Bay, our residents there, Riviera Beach, certain places in Lake Worth, certain West Palm. I don't know if I said Delray or not, but we know that by just thinking about it. But through this process, we identified those communities. And man, Jim, I will tell you, it was amazing to see the collaboration that happened. After I called the health centers, we called over to the State College, President Ava Parker at Palm Beach State College. She said, I think we have some more PPE. So this was early before, you know, all of the PPE was rushing in and all of the testing. She said, it may not be enough, but we'll put together what we have. And I called down to FAU. Their medical students were outsourcing PPE. So we cobbled along together all of this. And I tell you guys, it was amazing. We worked with city officials, with county officials. We worked with other health officials, with the neighborhood associations. And we went into the communities and did mobile pop-up testing. So we literally brought the doctors and nurses in communities where people could walk up to a tent and get tested, or drive around the corner and get tested. But it just took so much collaboration around the issue of, let's just make sure hurting people get what they need. The other thing was around this digital divide that we're facing right now. I have the opportunity, as we're speaking, Our foundation just approved a grant award for $300,000, and there's some other funding that's coming in to address this digital divide. Because one of the things we realized was that, hey, listen, now with this social distancing and technology is driving the day, for the families and the communities that did not have access to the internet, think how much more of a detriment it is, the consequences it is that they don't have access to Wi-Fi. But again, the unifying factor was people have a need and they're hurting. And I'm talking high levels of my colleagues who have come together and said, let's address this. And man, I believe that on the other side of this pandemic, more people are going to be willing to do that. Going to be willing to come a little bit out of their comfort zone to work with those they've not worked with before. I love this idea of stay in your lane, but let's run the race together. And that's the opportunity we have on the other side of this. And let's be real about the data. That's the other opportunity. Let's just get real about the data. Let's get real about what equity means. Let's get real about where inequity has happened. Let's get real about what are some of the more costly is going to, look, inequity cost us a lot socially. Equity is going to cost us a lot financially. Does that make sense? Inequity has cost a whole lot socially, mentally, emotionally. Correcting inequity is going to be expensive financially because we got to go back and dismantle and undo all of that stuff that is now residing in communities that have been disinvested and unequitably treated. But I do believe that with the right mindset, moving beyond COVID-19, part of it is going to be, we got to get real about the data and be honest about what we're seeing. We got to get clear of the fact that it's going to just cost us more to address this inequity. And not only that, moving in the same direction. I mean, just like the three of us, you know, I met Ian, and Ian said, hey, you got to meet Nate. And then we all got together. It's bringing together the minds, not only the minds, but the resources for people to get on the other side of this thing and be a whole lot better. And by the way, I don't want to return to normal. This is just a thought. I hear people say, I want to get back to normal. I don't, because normal didn't work the same for everybody. Normal wasn't as prosperous for everybody. We got to reform what we call normal. And in reforming normal, what we hope to do is be equitable, which means everybody has the same fair and just opportunity to have prosperity or optimal life outcomes according to their ability to work and earn. So I don't want to return to normal. Normal didn't work the same for everybody. But on the other side of this, I believe we can reform that normal. So that was my long answer to what can we do? Be real about the data, understand that inequity has cost a lot socially, emotionally, mentally, physically. So it's going to obviously inequity. So obviously equity is going to cost a lot financially for us to get on the other side of it to a reformed normal.
It sounds like you've identified opportunities, are enacting some of those opportunities, and those opportunities will lead to, as we rebuild, to not go back to the normal, which didn't work, rebuild a new foundation. In that, and not often do you get a chance, if you acquire a property, to gut it and start fresh. This is that, and that's a great point, and a huge opportunity that exists. And I'm hoping that anybody and everybody who can takes advantage of that. Let's relay the foundation. There had some cracks in it. It was lopsided. There were pieces missing, and some of it was outright sinking.
That's right.
And we know that well here in Florida with sinkholes. So it's a tremendous opportunity. In what you spoke to, it sounded was the Quantum Foundation involved in that, and if not, how did the Quantum Foundation respond to the pandemic locally?
I'd say our board of directors, we have a board of directors of 12 individuals, volunteers, business leaders, folks who had experience in life, who just giving their time to help guide the governance of this organization. And we're $150 million in the market. Every year, we pay out about $7.5 million in grants. And as soon as this hit back in March, our board immediately set aside the initial $250,000 to specifically address COVID-19 issues. We came back another 30 days later, and I said to the board, look, this is probably now late March, early April. Said there's more, and so they went with another 250,000. So now we're $500,000, and in addition to what we're currently funding. So we're about another $500,000 in it, and that's when the testing. When we realized we needed to do more around testing. So food was a huge issue. So we were funding the food banks, and we were helping to fund food pantries, and just making sure people could get the things they needed in the basic needs. Then the testing came about. Then we went back for another round of funding. So I mean, all in, by this point, we're close to $1 million in just on COVID-19, just in this stretch of time, the efforts that we've addressed. And this last thing around the digital divide, because people say, well, you're a health foundation. What's your role in a digital divide conversation? Well, look, health is not just the interaction between the patient and provider. Health is what happens in the neighborhood. Health is what happens where people work, live, play, and pray. And what we call that in our field is the social determinants of health. So the first thing that we did a strategic plan that recognized social determinants, things like housing, education, employment, your built environment. Those are the things that really determines your health outcome. So this idea of the digital divide, it made sense because now in the age of COVID, most of those factors are facilitated through technology. And the reason our board recently, just like this past week, approved the $300,000 for this pilot is because people who have been living in these communities of disinvestment are further in greater detriment because the things that they could usually access are now online. And so now some of them don't have the infrastructure for Wi-Fi, or the cost of Wi-Fi, or the quality of devices that they have of Wi-Fi. And then there's this whole other realm of digital literacy, digital skill, and full adoption. Like I could have an iPhone at home, but if I have multiple kids at home who need to do homework, one iPhone is not going to get it. First of all, you shouldn't be doing homework on an iPhone. Or I may have access to a laptop, but maybe all I know how to do on it is word process. I don't know how to do Zoom with my kids' teachers. I don't know how to do my medical appointment online. I don't know how to go and seek opportunities for housing assistance online, or how to apply for a job online. So one of the things we did with this pilot of $300,000 is to pilot what we're calling community tech navigators. And these navigators are going to go into these most disinvested communities alongside some community health workers. And they're going to help these communities at the grassroots level use technology to their benefit. So not only did we deploy money, we're actually helping to lead the conversation about why is technology so important now more than ever to the social factors that inform health, because technology is now the way that all is being facilitated. So we don't want to leave anybody behind, guys. You heard me say it. My heart breaks when people hurt. And I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And y'all hear me say this, I love my sleep. I want to go to bed at night. As you said, I like to go to bed feeling good about it. So I could not have rested knowing that there was going to be a whole group of people, over 92,000 people, as a matter of fact, in Palm Beach County that did not have broadband, any type of broadband subscription. And there are 15 census tracts where most of these families are and these communities are. And so we're targeting those areas, man. And I feel good about that. I feel good about what Quantum has done financially. I feel good about what we're doing just in terms of helping to lead a conversation with testing, what we did and doing with our business community, with the school district and the county around broadband. I go back to that unifying factor. It's been amazing to work with all of these partners. Again, the school district, our county, our business community, other nonprofits, other foundations, just rallying together to do this, man. I guess I'm getting back to that whole hopeful moment, because getting to see this stuff happen, I know people are still hurting, but I'm hopeful in the opportunity to deploy resources and help bring them along, man. That's what I think the opportunity is as we now at Quantum, as we continue to address and respond to not only COVID and what happens after COVID, but create a path forward for people.
It sounds like Quantum is a very benevolent organization who has put their money where their mouth is, and a time that is direly needed. And just hats off to you all. Tremendous respect for the work that you all are doing. Some people who have those things and just take it for granted have no idea the impact that makes, that grassroots effort to getting to the people in need to help them. There's physical health, there's mental health, there's a different, and you all have expanded that view to encompass health as a factor of prosperity, if we wanted to tie that into the word today. So kudos to you and the organization that you lead, Quantum, for your investment into the community. It sounds, in speaking with you, that you're also very passionate about this. You've chosen this walk. You are going after it, not just assertively, aggressively. And I get the sense that, only being a half centurion, there's much, much more in store. So I'm excited for your future. And I want to ask, where do you see yourself in, maybe the next 15 years?
It's funny, just a minute ago, I wrote this down. You said, I have chosen this walk. What's interesting, man, is I feel like this walk chose me. And here's why I tell you that. Believe it or not, I am by nature one of the very quiet, introverted, growing up not at all confident, lack self-esteem, lack self-confidence. It's amazing that a walk that required confidence and esteem, a walk that required someone who was much more gregarious or much more outgoing would choose me, because I was not the likely candidate based on my natural being and features of who I am. And that takes me to the next 15 years. I said this to my wife, by the way, and she was like, well, I said, listen, Kira, in 15 years or so, you start thinking about slowing down. I don't know if I'll retire. I'm 50, that's 65. Maybe I'll still be doing some things in philanthropy, maybe here at Quantum. I don't know exactly that, but one of the things I know that I want in 15 years, I want to rediscover that childhood presence that I had growing up in the country, where after the rains, I'd go out, there's a ditch that ran along the sides on both sides of my grandparents' house. And I'd run out there and we catch the tadpoles. And we put them in jars and we watch the tadpoles turn to frogs. And then we would release them in the grass and they go hop away. Or dragonflies, we call them mosquito hawks or skeeter hawks for short. Everything in our community had to have a short name. You just got to shorten it. So mosquito hawks became mosquito hawks. And we catch them, and not to harm them. There were no animals harmed in these moments. But sometimes we put thread on the tail and just tie it to our wrist, and they would fly around. We get tired, you let them go. But those are the simple childhood things. In 15 years, I want to still be a part of how we're shaping our future. But I want to get to enjoy some of those old things that I remember growing up in the country. At some point in time, I'd love to teach. I started the path of working on my doctorate. I'd love to do a terminal degree in some form of doctorate. I'd love to teach, maybe just do a couple speaking gigs here or there. I don't know that I have the patience to write a book like you did, Nate, but I heard you have to write a book to go speak. So maybe I'll just get you to help me write a book just so I can go. No one's going to listen to me without a book. So maybe you need to help me write a book.
Sure.
But I sense that I really want to slow down my internal being while allowing my external being to continue to do what I believe the walk has chosen me to do. And that is to help other people explore the quality of life and have the quality of life that they desire. So I dream of having a home somewhere in Georgia with some land and a wraparound porch and a little tire swing out there. And I want to have a little garden because my granddaddy had a garden. I want to have a little garden where I don't like being outdoors. I don't like the sun or bugs. So I don't know how this garden thing will work out. I got to work on that one. But I tell my wife, I say, I want to have access to like a little cobblestone road, and I want to walk to the market, and just those simple things in life. So I don't know, beyond around teaching, just letting my inner being be more relaxed while my external being continue to do what I do, man. That's what I see in the next 15 years. My kids will be a little older. Much older, adults by then for sure. But that's, I'll never stop doing what the walk has chosen me to do. I may just change gears in how I do it.
I like the way you go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, I hear that. That was beautifully encapsulated. And so just a suggestion, Eric, there's a greenhouse. So that way you don't have to be out in the sun, but you can still have your garden. You can just construct a greenhouse. So
you got it. There you
yeah.
go.
So nice greenhouse on your property.
Yeah. You just completed the vision for me. Greenhouse. Thank you, Ian. I knew there was a reason we needed to meet. If nothing else, it was that.
All about solutions on this show. What a vision. Picturesque. Hopefully, if it would have it, I'll be able to join you on that porch with a glass of lemonade.
Come on, man.
As long as the sun is setting on the opposite side.
On the other side. That's why I want a wraparound porch, because I want to. Well, I'm going to build a house facing north and south. Because right now I live in a house that faces east and west. Not good at 8 a.m. in South Florida or at 3 p.m. in South Florida. So I'm going to build north-south, and I'm going to have a wraparound porch so I can just move my rocker. I have a rocking chairs at each corner, north, east, south, west, and I'll just choose the rocker that doesn't have as much sun. So you come on, y'all come on out to the house with me, as we would say in the country. Y'all come on by the house. As my granddad said, y'all have some supper.
So you might be a granddad by then, which makes me ask the granddad joke. Why did the granddad put wheels on his rocker? So he could rock and roll. Okay, moving right along. That was your own word. So now that we've talked about your future self, the aged as in fine wine, I won't say older, but self, knowing what you have, the wisdom that you have right now, what one or two pieces of advice would you say give to your younger self?
I actually love that question. I heard that question asked. I've heard it asked of other people. This is my first time I'm getting to actually say it out loud. So thank you. I've been waiting for somebody to ask me this one. I would tell young Eric to relax. Number one, I would tell him to relax because, Ian, you said something about the conscious. There's a difference between the thinking and when the consciousness is awakened. The one thing I didn't say is when my consciousness was awakened, I became extremely anxious. Anxious about what happened to men and women who stand between oppression and the people. Anxious about, well, can I do enough? Will anything change? And I remember feeling a lot of anxiety, in my earlier years. I would tell younger Eric to relax. And the other thing that I would say is be a little more hopeful in this regard. All things work together for the good of those. In my tradition and in my faith, it says all things work together for good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And I would tell young Eric to believe that a bit more, and believe that even when there are things that seem to be working opposite or in opposing forces to what you're trying to get done, I'd remind myself, or I'd tell my younger self, hey man, just think about it this way. Even those things have a way of moving forward the progress. Those things are working. As long as I am working in accord with the purpose, again, in my faith, with the purpose of my faith. So those two things, relax, man. I say to myself every day, relax, man. You're too anxious about many things, too many things. And the other thing I say, be hopeful and believe that no matter what's happening, those things that are happening, even the painful things, they have a way. And this is what I do tell my children. I tell my younger self that, and when I look at these 4 children, I'll tell them, even that stuff has a way of working for your good. So I would tell me to appreciate even the stuff that didn't feel good a little bit more because it's working for the good. And man, would I tell that guy to relax. He was about the most anxious little creature I'd have ever been around. And he was me, so I couldn't get away from him.
Be anxious for nothing. Yes.
That's right.
And it definitely sounds like you are, when you say it shows you've been called to a purpose. There's no question about that, and a hero to many. I have no doubt, which makes me want to ask the very last question. Who is your hero and why?
A hero and why? Can I give 2 answers?
Absolutely.
One is a real answer, and one is just kind of my fun answer. My real answer is my mom, man. I don't have I don't have mentors in the traditional sense of mentors. Like I love to mentor younger professionals, young folks, younger guys in ministry. I've never had intentional mentors. No one who came and put an arm around me and said, I'm going to lead the way with you. I don't have mentors to name. My mom, though, this woman taught me everything I know from afar, from close up. She even taught us based on the mistakes she made. This is how amazing this woman is. She told my sisters and me things that she's like, here, she literally would say, it ends with you all. Certain patterns in our family, certain things, she would say, it ends with you. So she mentored me in so many ways. So my mom is in real life my greatest mentor. I watched her. She coached me. She still coaches me. We laugh a lot now. I'm older, so we get to talk as friends sometimes even. But in my somewhat fun answer, I would say my hero comes from the Avengers. You gotta have an Avenger hero. So my Avenger hero is the Hulk. And this is not going to sound good at first, but let me just explain it. Is the Hulk. And it was from the first Avenger movie. At the end, the battle scene, you gotta love a good battle scene at the end of the movie. And at the end of the movie, the battle scene, so all of the Avengers are now fighting. So they're all doing their thing. The web, well, I don't think Spider-Man was in that one. So,
Spoiler alert.
Huh?
Spoiler alert.
And this thing has been out like 10 years now. So if you hadn't seen the first one, you did a loss. So Thor's in there throwing his hammer around and Captain America throwing his shield around. And at this point in time, David Banner character, the Hulk, he hadn't shown up for the battle because he was out lost somewhere. So he shows up on this old motorcycle. He's barely pushing it along, and he shows up as his man character, the David Dr. Banner character. And Captain America's fighting, and he's fighting the big things coming out of the sky, the big port, and they're fighting the enemy. And David Banner pushes up the old motorcycle, and he's watching them fight. And Captain America's character, Chris Evans, he turned around and he looked at David Banner, the Ruffalo guy. He said, hey, now would be a great time for you to get angry, because the secret to the Hulk's strength was his anger. He'd get angry and then he'd turn to the Hulk. And so Captain America said, hey, now would be a nice time for you to get angry. And David Banner looked and he said, that's my secret. I'm always angry. And he just turned around and turned into the Hulk, rawr, and started smashing. Why do I love that? It's not about loving anger, and it's not about loving smashing stuff either. But I think about a quote from James Baldwin. James Baldwin said this in his day. He said, to be Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to always be in a rage. He said, but the secret is not to allow the rage to destroy you. And I realized that the things that I saw growing up did cause me sometimes to feel anger and rage. I love what the Hulk said. I don't like what he always does because he throws stuff around and breaks stuff up. I'm not saying that's the reason he's my hero. He's my hero because he had learned the secret of his anger. He learned how to control it. What the rest of the world didn't know that he knew was, I don't have to get angry to become my stronger alter ego. He says, I can just think myself to the point that I become that man. So man, when I got that, I was like, I love that character. I love that movie because he said, my secret is I always have the juice inside of me that make me the strength of who I always am. Y'all just think you get to trigger me, but it's not about the trigger. It's that consciousness of strength that's always inside me. So the Incredible Hulk is my favorite. He's my hero because he learned how to control the anger, and he learned how to become the greatest strength of who he was by simply saying, when I need it, I turn it on. When I don't need it, I'm just my regular old David Banner.
Profoundly good answer, both of them.
The weirdest stuff, man. I watch these TV shows with my sons, and I sit there and I overanalyze it. They're just watching it for the smashing, and I'm like, man, that was deep. That was real deep.
I gotta say, Eric, that I used that example probably a week ago. That is my favorite part of the whole Avengers series.
Serious?
That exact point. I use it every opportunity that I get. I'd like to jump in with like a little fun fact.
Yep.
Speaking of the Avengers and those sorts of heroes, are you guys aware that Stan Lee created the X-Men as a tribute to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? So during that period, of course, how prolific Stan Lee is. He wanted to, in the period of the 60s, is that the unrest, he wanted to create a comic book about what he was seeing from the display of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. But he knew that if he created a black character, a comic book strip, that it wouldn't go anywhere. So Professor X actually represents Martin Luther King, and his disability that leaves him in the wheelchair is the fact that he is a black man, right? But if you remember, his consciousness was to the point where he could control everyone, even Magneto, unless Magneto had to put that shield on to protect him from Martin Luther King. So that right there was showing Stan Lee's take on the fact that he knew it was a mental game. And it was a little bit mental by any means necessary, where Malcolm X came in. So he is Magneto. And so all of the X-Men or mutants are different facets of African Americans' ability to go uptown and downtown, to shapeshift, to move in between different places and pull on these supernatural powers that are in them that have allowed them to survive for so long. That was his way of recognizing the struggle. So you saw right into that with the Avengers, and you saw right into that with the Hulk. But look it up. When I found out, I was floored. I shared it with everyone that I knew, and I thought it was brilliant. And I used to tell people all the time, I'm like, yo, he's an X-Men. He's one of us. But I had no idea that was really the correlation that Stan Lee was trying to exhibit in his comic strip. So
I did not know that. Man, I'm gonna look that up, man. That is interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
Learn something new every day.
It has been nothing short of a pleasure and an honor having you on today's show. There was tremendous insight, input, inspiration, and encouragement. Thank you for taking the time to share your time with us and your wisdom and your insights. I always like to give guests an opportunity for final words to share with the audience as we close out. So if there's anything that you wanted to say or leave with them, whatever you would like to impart, that was your opportunity to do that now.
Well, I want to end with the word of the day, Ian, if I may. Prosperity, thought, consciousness, to make sure we distinguish those. Prosperity of being, well-being, as well. There are those of us who have achieved a certain level of prosperity, if you will, in our health and well-being, in our consciousness and our thought. And I look at you gentlemen on the screen and I say, you know what? You've achieved that, But I have to remind all of us of one thing, and that is, to whom much is given, much is required. And so those are always my words. Those are my words. To whom much is given, much is required. And I think when we have been given the opportunity of prosperity in whatever definition and form, and again, not just financial, what is required then of you, O man, but to love mercy and justice and to walk humbly? Meaning that now it's your turn to give the very things that have been given to you. So that's my closing is, to whom much has been given. And we who even have grown up with little of material wealth had so much more to give, rich in love, rich in gratitude. There's so much that is expected of us now to give that. So that's it, man. To whom much is given, much is required. So get ready. If you're chosen for the walk, get ready to give, and to receive and be fulfilled by what you get to do.
Way to put it into perspective. Prosperity. Don't just give to get to give.
Yeah.
Very, very different. Thank you for that. And again, thank you for your time. Man. Brother Ian, any parting words you want to share?
Thanks again, you guys. This was awesome. Eric, it was, I feel so grateful that you had time to meet us today, and the wonderful work that you're doing with the Quantum Foundation. I applaud you, and I will continue to spread good news coming from the Quantum Foundation. And as a black man in that position, the way that you've been able to navigate the uptown and the downtown is a superhero quality. And so thank you very much for putting yourself, for accepting that position and for being so selfless. And just another thing just to add is, the advent of the internet, right, was meant to level the playing field, right? And so I noticed how you kept going back to talking about the fact that quantum was a health environment, but you kept talking about the digital divide. And so I just wanted to, once again, just encourage you and let you know just how much of the right path you really are on, because yeah, within the digital divide, we still need to level the playing field. And your creativity and some of the things that you are initiating in that environment to keep the playing field level because through the digital divide is exemplary. And so I'm so happy that you're here. And I really appreciate this conversation with you guys today.
It's been good.
Indeed. Indeed. Eric, where can our listeners and viewers find out more about you and the Quantum Foundation?
We can be found on the web, Quantum, Quantum, as in Mary, quantumfoundation.org.
Awesome. Awesome. Perfect. Again, thank you very much for sharing your views, visions, your life, your transparency, humility, and impact that you've made. Yeah, I'm sure our viewers will be very grateful for what they are able to take away from this time together. In perspective of I'll say the mission or the flow of my book, Battle Endurance, it's let go, live now, win. And Eric exemplifies letting go of the things he didn't control, not dwelling on those, but not letting them prohibit his growth. He has chosen to live now in the moment. We've heard that be a theme throughout everything that he says. Wherever he was at in his life, he lived now, and clearly through his being purposed, his being chosen, he's winning. There have wins that have been established, and many others have benefited from him winning. So Eric exemplifies the let go, live now, win to a tremendous degree. And I just have the greatest respect for you for doing that. I appreciate your insight. And to all of my viewers, as you always hear me say, be like that guy. Be like Eric. Live your best life on purpose.
On purpose.
Now, thank you for joining us for today's episode.
Thank you, guys.
I hope that you were able to find some nuggets of wisdom, some inspiration, and something to help you in your life's journey as you progress towards living your best life. If you enjoyed what you heard today or were helped in some way, please send me a message. Send me an email, drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. I love hearing how this content is helping individuals in their daily lives. For more information, content, videos, and information on my book, and links to all my social media, please visit natebattle.com. Remember, today is the youngest you'll ever be, so go out and make the most of it. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Live your best life on purpose now.